our 10 Commandments. They are used and abused in so many different ways for so many different purposes. You have conservative Christians like Roy Moore who want to use them as a banner of traditionalism to march under, so-called traditionalism. You have people like UUs and comedians who make jokes about them and demote them to the 10 suggestions. And then you have hardline atheists like Sam Harris who relegate them, along with the rest of religion, to the cesspool of mythology. I've written a book about the 10 Commandments, and part of my impetus for writing this book was to rescue them from the cesspool of mythology. I wanted to reveal them to you as I see them, as a radical manifesto for the 21st century. Because what all of these people on the right and the left are missing is the countercultural essence of the 10 Commandments. It's a message that on this Earth Day weekend-ish, kind of, has particular ecological resonance for us today. Remember that the 10 Commandments emerged out of an experience of slavery. This week, many of us have just finished telling the Passover story where the ancient Israelites were refugees in the land of Egypt and they became enslaved. They were victims of systemic violence and cruelty. Moses encounters God at the burning bush, goes to Pharaoh, demands their freedom. The Pharaoh refuses. The 10 plagues happen, each of which, by the way, has an ecological dimension, but that's for another time. And finally, there's the dramatic escape through the parting of the Red Sea. But what now? The newly freed Israelites who only know slavery are out in an open desert. They have the unique opportunity to establish a civilization from scratch. They've left a social space and they've entered a wilderness space. How should they organize their new world? What will it take to create a society that's free from the kinds of oppression and excess that characterize the society that they had left? The 10 Commandments are a first answer to that question. In the story, God speaks to the entire people directly for the very first time. The experience of being there is described in the legends as terrifying. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's crazy sounds, earthquakes, the sky opening up. It might have been the mountain itself that was so terrifying. Maybe the people trembled in awe at this encounter, this moment of contact with the natural world, the majestic, towering mountain that spoke its truth. The voice of God, in one description, was an echoless voice. I love that, an echoless voice, as if it just traveled on its own, on a plane all by itself. In this moment of revelation, God makes a self-introduction for the first time ever, with the following words. I am YHVH, your God. YHVH, those 4 letters in Hebrew, are the verb to be. To be. In other words, I am being your God. It's not a big man in the sky, it's not a big woman in the sky, it's not a big anything up in the sky. It's everything that is known and unknown. It's past, present, future, beyond time. It's all the natural systems of the earth, laws of physics, biological processes. The entire natural world is an emanation from this God. It's the bare face of reality itself. So I want to invite you to really let that sink in. In our society, we're so used to imagining the God of the Hebrew Bible as some kind of giant male being that punishes and judges. It's the idea that so many of us have rejected. But as a famous rabbi once said, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. Here in this seminal moment in the Torah, where God is introducing God's self for the very first time, revealing what God really is, we learn that God is being. From this perspective, where God is not a being, but being itself, the first commandment sounds kind of Buddhist, right? If this were all there were to it, the concept of God would be empty of any characteristics. God would have no stake in human events because God would equally saturate every dimension of any given situation. If this were the entire description of God, God would be apolitical and amoral. Climate change wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter to God if the polar bears went extinct, or if humans went extinct for that matter. Everything just gets thrown back in the cosmic blender again at the end of the day anyway. But I believe that the Ten Commandments actually articulate a worldview in which life on earth matters a great deal. It describes a world of beauty and balance and inherent worth and dignity that is worth fighting for. Because God's introduction doesn't end with naming God as just what is. It doesn't end there. It says, I am YHVH, your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt, from a house of slaves. It's a stunning statement. In the opening moments of this revelation, the beginning of the Ten Commandments, God is identified as the heart of the struggle for freedom from slavery. The one thing we are to know about this God, the one defining characteristic, is that this is the God of liberation, the power of liberation itself. So this is where the radical part comes in. God is not impartial. God is not just the random dominoes falling in the universe. God is the force at Mount Sinai, the force of nature and the force in us that upends human power structures. In the light of this, you can read the Ten Commandments 100 different ways. But for the purposes of today, I want to invite you to join me in listening for the ecological teachings of these commandments. I believe there's an ecological thread that runs through all of them. They call us into a very different relationship with one another and with the rest of the creatures of the earth. I'm not going to go through all 10 today. You can read my book for that. But I want to explore the first commandment a bit because it's particularly nourishing. After God's self-introduction, the first commandment says, "You shall have no other gods before me or besides me." Remember, that means no other gods but the life force of liberation. I believe that if we allowed this concept to be our guiding light, it would profoundly transform every one of us. I can't say exactly how it would transform you, how it would transform me, but it would change the way that we feel about ourselves and our relationship with others and our impact in the larger world. Because orienting our lives around this vision, orienting around the God of liberation, requires us to practice resistance against other gods. Other gods that we all worship in our modern world one way or another. What other gods do we have today? Most of us could do a pretty quick scan of our lives and admit that we have pretty much all of them. We have the obvious ones: the God of money, the God of power, the God of prestige and success, the God of pleasure. We have the less obvious ones: the God of convenience, the God of what other people think, the God of getting to choose, the God of how things have always been. These other gods in our lives demand various forms of supplication. We do a lot for these other gods. We buy things, we use things, we say things, we do things, even when those things come at the expense of the health of our land and skies and ocean. The greatest and most powerful of other gods in American culture is that of business. The freedom of corporations to make money is held as a sacred imperative that supersedes all other values. It supersedes the right of workers to make a salary that can keep them out of poverty. It supersedes the right of consumers to protect their health. And by its nature, it pillages the earth and exploits the animals on it, superseding the rights of entire species and ecosystems to exist. Resistance to the other gods is inherently countercultural. Because in our consumerist, choice-oriented culture, we look to false gods for salvation and healing. We look to other gods to give us special powers. We demean ourselves working and sacrificing for the other gods in our world. It's personal and it's political. It's personal because when we worship other gods, we are giving up our power to things and people that will never make us happy or fulfilled. It's political because collectively, our worship of other gods of profit, power, and convenience and choice have caused exactly the kinds of oppression that the Israelites escaped in Egypt. And the destruction of our ecosystems is bringing plagues upon us all. To change all of this and to serve only the God of life and liberation would be to change everything. So that basically is the first commandment. And we can look at all of the others in this light as well. Think of the commandment to honor your father and mother. There's a universal human intuition that the earth is our ultimate parent. The text of the commandment says, honor your father and mother so that your days might be long upon the land that God is giving you. The word for land here is not the geopolitical land of Israel. Most of the time when there's talk in the Torah of the land that God is giving you, it's talking about that geopolitical land. But it's a different word in the Hebrew here. Here the word is Adamah, which means earth or soil. The fifth commandment addresses our relationship to the earth itself. We are to honor our parents and our source, the oceans that birth life, the soil that grows all of our food, the rainforests that serve as the breath of the planet, the array of animals and plants and insects that all work together in delicate balance, and the ecosystems and the atmosphere that create the perfect conditions, the only possible conditions for our survival. The fifth commandment calls us to humility before our source in all its forms. And then, of course, the commandment to keep a Sabbath is a radical ecological practice. Everyone and everything is to come to a screeching halt 1 day out of 7. Some analysts today believe that for the world to stop production and extraction and unnecessary consumption 1 out of every 7 days would be all that we would need to restore our planet to health. That would take care of it. But we don't take such breaks. We consume and consume and consume, and the same economies that demand nonstop consumption from us demand nonstop production from the earth. Every one of the products and services that we enjoy had its birthplace in some natural ingredient that at some point in its history was extracted from the land or the oceans. It's all around us. Trees right here. Look at all the materials, the floor, the rug, the everything, right? The glass in the windows here. Everything comes from the earth. And the extraction never, ever stops. The law of the Sabbath stipulates that all work cease on the seventh day, including that of farmers and animals. It specifically says animals, your cattle, get a break once a week. Effectively, it gives the land a time to regenerate. And later in the biblical text, the concept of the sabbatical year is introduced. 1 year out of every 7, humans are supposed to let the land lie fallow neither planting nor harvesting, and enter ourselves a kind of modified hibernation. So you put all these together, not worshiping the other gods of business and money and convenience, honoring our source, keeping a Sabbath and letting the animals of the earth rest every week, along with not stealing and not killing and not coveting, and you start to see a vision emerge of a very different relationship between humans and the rest of the earth. And it also sounds incredibly challenging. The idea of commandments, to begin with, can feel harsh, especially to those of us who are already feeling overtaxed, overwhelmed in our lives and can't really think of taking on anything else. It turns out that in Jewish tradition, the 10 Commandments are not called commandments at all. They're known simply as 10 duvarim, words, things, concepts. To the extent that we have the capacity, they function like commandments. They challenge us to change and to grow. But to the extent that we ourselves are hurting or lost, to the extent that we need nurture, the perspective swivels. And the commandments, like a sleeve inverting itself, transform into blessings. So I want to share with you in closing my sort of retelling of the 10 Commandments as blessings. And what happens when you imagine them as projecting a hoped-for future, a prayer of the future for each one of us. Number 1, may you be blessed with power directly from the tap, the source of life and liberation. May it and nothing else guide you. 2, may you be blessed with authenticity. May you be able to discern the real from the simulation. 3, may you be blessed with innocence. May you always speak the goodness of life and break free from cynicism. 4, may you be blessed with peace. May you luxuriate in sacred time and space every week. 5, may you be blessed with humility. May you honor your source in all its forms. 7, may you be blessed with compassion. May you be a life-sustaining force for all the creatures of the earth. 7, may you be blessed with love. May you repair what is broken and cherish what is imperfect. 8, may you be blessed with abundance. May you never need to take what is not yours. 9, may you be blessed with honesty. May you be a conduit for the voices of truth in your world. And 10, may you be blessed with enough. May you always be filled with the freedom, joy, and dignity of God.